We're up to Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph by the Gemara. This thing's not going on. Oh no, it's work. Okay, we're up to Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph by the Gemara. The Mishnah says somebody stood up and he was makdish everything that he owns. And the Mishnah talks about what? Yes. So now this person's got house, he's got cattle, he's got all kinds of items, and the Mishnah works out what he should do with everything. One of the things the Mishnah talks about is if he's got something which is royal to be a carbon civil, something which is fitted to be a carbon civil. The Gemara is discussing first what is that item. Now, normally we would say a sheep, a goat, etc. The reason why the Gemara doesn't explain that is because our Mishnah describes all those other things. The Mishnah explicitly talks about sheep, goats, and all the rest. So everything which is normally bought as a carbon, the Mishnah talks about. It says it like this: the Mishnah must be talking about keteris, because keteris is not mentioned explicitly. Since keteris is not mentioned explicitly, it must be the only thing that we're talking about in our Mishnah, which is royal for carbon sibul, which the question is what to do with it. Now, what happened was we're talking about a worker got keteris as payment for a job done. The Yisroel of this machlokes we actually explained yesterday, we repeat today, not such an easy one. They're both saying almost exactly the same thing. There's a fundamental difference. Again, a person is makdish everything that he owns. The Mishnah says, well, you should do with all the items. One of the items the Mishnah does not tell us exactly what it is. We assume it's referring to the keteris. Why is it the keteris? Because otherwise, if you talk about sheep or goats, the Mishnah already talks about everything else. Mincha, oil, wine. The Mishnah talks about everything. The only thing the Mishnah do must be keteris. So one man says, indeed, it is the keteris. Another man says it's the keteris which regards wages. The machlokes is based on the fact, is one allowed to produce keteris in his own private premises, in his own private kitchen, or not? The first man says yes. And therefore, when a person was makdish everything he owned, it is possible that one of the things that he owned was privately produced keteris. The second man holds there's no such thing. You can't make your own keteris. You have to use the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash. So if a person is makdish everything he owns, it's impossible that he should have privately owned keteris. So what could he have? If he's a worker for the Beis Hamikdash, it is possible that the Beis Hamikdash gave him keteris as payment for wages, but not that he actually produced his own keteris. We discussed that yesterday a tiny bit. The fact is like this, that if there was leftover keteris from the year before, we wanted to rebuy it. The way to rebuy it was to give it to somebody else to buy back. Very good. Now, the Mishnah says, according to Rabbi Akiva, you give the keteris to workers. But Nazai says, no, you don't do that. Why not? My tama to Benazai, shenehegdish v'schal malocha el alamois. Benazai holds you never use keteris as wages. Why can't you use keteris as wages? And we discussed this also before. It's a delicate point that whenever you've got keteris, up to you Beis Hamikdash by the 2 dots, 4 lines after where the Gemara starts. We just finished that last line before that. Is like this: that we don't want to be put the keteris unless it's on a substantial on something, on a substance, not on the malacha. So if you got keteris, you never give it to somebody as payment for a job. What you might do is use it to give it to somebody who's giving something to the Beis Hamikdash. We don't want to be putting the keteris on just a job. The reason is not tangible. It's not tangible. According to Ben Azai, you don't redeem keteris unless something is tangible. Okay, new topic. Tamon Tanina. We learned a Mishnah there. It's a Mishnah in Tamur. Yesh b'kodesh b'dek habayis. The Mishnah there compares kodesh b'dek habayis to kodesh mizbeach, and the Mishnah explains that each one has a chumrah over the other. Kodesh mizbeach is what? We explain more better. What's kodesh mizbeach? Korbanos. Kodesh mizbeach is anything which you decide to bring a korban. Oil, shlamim, chatas. Kodesh b'dek habayis is what? Where you're giving money to the building fund of the Beis Hamikdash. Building fund. Now, great grandfather was Shul Rosenberg. He used to collect for Manchester Yeshiva. Did it his whole life. I was just reading the Sefer Year of Das, and that Shiva brought out that he said that his father, Moshe Yitzchak Siegel, is learning in Shemayim with Shul Rosenberg. The Shul Rosenberg never went to Yeshiva. and he was unfortunately very unlearned. He was really not in any way somebody which you could describe him as, a great Moshe Tzachzik, the father of Shoshiv, was one of the Gedolei Hador. But he said, since he supported Torah, so he's a Sachans, and he's sure they're learning together. It's an unbelievable thing to write to say for Yehuda. And what he used to do is he was very, very good at collecting. That was his whole life. He spent all his time collecting. And there was people who didn't even know. There's a lot of legends, stories said in the family about him. One time he went collecting for yeshiva. So he said, Nebuchadnezzar, Shiva, how many people at the Shiva? So he said there's 50 bochum in the yeshiva. He thought there were 50 people sitting Shiva, gave a huge donation. But one of the stories, which he used to do this a lot, he was devoted to giving money. And his father was a Talmud Chacham Taka. And his father once, a man came into his house, a Rosh Shiva, collecting not from Rosh Shiva, and Shoresberg gave him a pound, which in those days was a huge amount of money. And his father, in front of this Rosh Shiva, told him off and said to him, you've got eyes, you've got legs. That's how you pay for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Pay him more. And he made him pay and pay. His father he had that understanding, which in those days was very, very rare, that even though he was a proper balabos, not the best way, but the fact is, but one of the stories, which is, it's like one time he went collecting, and he always used to try and work out before he went collecting how much to ask for. It's a delicate thing. You don't want to ask for too little because the person might give it to you and you could have asked for more. So one time he asked, and the person straight away gave him the money. So he realized that he could have asked for much more. So he said that was for the building fund. Now we have for the Svarim fund. And when he gave him that, he said, I've got another fund. Clothing fund. Rabbi says that there's a big there were many different funds. There were different funds. One was called Bedek Beis, and one was Mizbeach. Two completely different financial issues. One was to provide korbanos, and one was for the building. Now the Mishnah there in Tamur tells us 4 chumras in Bedek Beis. Really, which one's more chumra? Mizbeach. Mizbeach is much, much, much more Kaddish. But there were 4 chumras in Bedek Beis. It's good to remember these 4 chumras. Also, I should really buy a big wallet for everybody, and then you can write down in your wallet all these different things that are important to remember. So this is one of the important things to remember. What are the 4 chumras of Bedek Beis? So what are they? Shestamek Deishas Bedek Beis. That means if a person says something's Kaddish without explaining which one it is, whether it's Mizbeach or Bedek Beis, what do we say? It's Bedek Beis. So if I say this book is Kaddish without specifying what, Bedek Beis. What's one chumrah? Second chumrah, Hegdesh Bedek Beis Chal Lakol. Hegdesh Mizbeach is only Chal on korbanos. Hegdesh Bedek Beis could be Chal on the book, it could be Chal on the table because you just sell it and use the funds for the building. This is a very interesting chumrah. If you're Makdish a korban and the korban has a baby, or you Makdish grain and for mincha and you grow it and it grows, it's the gedulim are not Kaddish because only the item itself goes to the Mizbeach, not which is Kaddish. But if you Makdish something for Bedek Beis, let's say you Makdish a cow for Bedek Beis or a lion for Bedek Beis. Makdish a lion for Bedek Beis. It's an expensive thing, a lion costs £10,000 perhaps. And then the lion has a baby, then the baby as well cannot be used without selling it because everything which is Kaddish for the Beis, even the Gedulim is Kaddish. The Kohanim are not allowed to get anything from it. If you're Makdish a korban, let's say an oila or a chatar, the Kohanim get to eat from it. Bedek Beis, the Kohanim get nothing. So there's 4 chumras in Bedek Beis. Says the Gemara, that Mishnah must go like Rabbi Lezer, because our Mishnah we learned that Tanina on Makdish lechos avis when beimor lekagav mizbeach. So the Chayim when they came, so Bezem is Chayim v'chol tzorch eres, came v'chol tzorch is v'chol shlamim. But the main yipru shad nesachar Bedek Beis. The Mishnah says that if you're Makdish everything that you own, and inside what you own is male animals and female animals, we don't say you should go directly on the mizbeach. What do we say? We say you sell it to somebody who needs it from the Mizbeach, but that the money should go to Bedek Beis. We see over here that the Mishnah holds that everything goes to Bedek Beis, even though it could go to the Mizbeach. So we see over here that the Mishnah, which says in Tamur that the Chumrah Bedek Beis is that everything goes to the hekdesh of Bedek Beis. That Chumrah is who? Is Rabbi Lezer. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Tamid Rabbi Lezer. What's the svar of Rabbi Lezer? So Rabbi Lezer dashed in the pasuk. The pasuk says it's 2 psukim one after the next. The Gemara actually has them in. But basically, the pasuk says this very quickly. Vishki yakdish space. So a person makdish his house. Kodesh Hashem. The Kohen has to evaluate it. The question is, the Torah talks about being makdish your house twice. And the question is, why is the Torah to talk about Makdish your house twice? Well, the Gemara answers is one is talking about somebody's Makdish his actual home, the other one is Makdish everything in his home. And in both cases, the Torah says that it should go completely to the Hekdash. So therefore, one is to tell you that if you Makdish your home, let's say you go home, you say, I want to give a big present to Hashem, Makdish my house, the house belongs to the Makdish Beit Beis. While if you Makdish everything in your house, it also goes to the Beit Beis. Is a raya to Rabbi Lezer that when you Makdish everything in your home, it goes to Beit Beis. Let's say inside, what we talk about in the base diva, if we talk about the house itself, there's another possible Makdish Galis base, so if you Makdish your home. It can't be talk about Makdish your actual house, because there's another possible referring to. Everything you Makdish you goes to Beit Beis. Says the Gemara, we're going to have a three-way machlokes, and let's get a three-way machlokes on a machlokes. It's not always easy. I remember the first time as a child. Well, machlokes in our Mishnah, which is Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua, when you Makdish everything you own, and you've got within it sheep, do we say that the sheep go to Beit Beis or do they go to the Mizbeach? That's the essential machlokes in our Mishnah. Again, you Makdish everything that you have. According to Rabbi Lezer, everything goes to Beit Beis. Only what you do is you sell the sheep for korbanos, and then the money goes to Beit Beis. According to Rabbi Yeshua, no. Part of the sheep go to the Mizbeach, and not everything will go to Beit Beis. Now, the three-way machlokes. One man says they always argue. It makes a difference how you Makdish it. One man says no, it depends. If you Makdish only your flock, then everybody agrees that it goes to the Mizbeach. Because when you Makdish not literally everything, just your flocks are things that go on the Mizbeach. Mashenki, if you Makdish everything that you own, so it's got flocks and pots and pans, then we say like this. One man says that the sheep go to the Mizbeach and the pots and pans go to Beis. Another man says no, everything goes to Beis because since pots and pans come on the Mizbeach, neither do the sheep go on the Mizbeach. The other man says no. When you Makdish everything, including the pots and pans, everybody agrees it goes to Beit Beis. Since pots and pans can't go on the Mizbeach, so it must go to Beit Beis. They only argue when you Makdish your flock. So it's a three-way machlokes regarding a machlokes. Rabbi Lezer and Yeshua argue when you Makdish what you own, does it all go to Beit Beis or does some go on the Mizbeach? One man says they argue whether you said a Makdish everything, literally everything, or whether you Makdish all your flocks. They argue in both cases. One man says no. When you Makdish only your flocks, then everybody agrees that it goes to the Mizbeach. The machlokes is only when you Makdish everything that you own. The one says no. When you Makdish everything you own, everybody agrees it goes to the Beit Beis. Since it's got within it pots and pans which can't go on the Mizbeach, obviously you mean that the sheep should also go to Beit Beis. They only argue when you Makdish your flocks. So it's a three-way machlokes, pshat of lesson Rabbi Yeshua. So the first book, let's go. It says my pligin. What do they argue about? But Makdish nechosam. Aber Makdish edvo. We Makdish your flocks. Kolam amoidi. Everybody agrees to the Mizbeach. Rabbi Bob Hodav Hashem. My pligin. Makdish edvo. We Makdish your flocks. Aber Makdish nechosam. Kolam amoidi. Should Beit Beis. Adat dabze nichel kasha do Bob. We'll ask the question like this: Behemol lo Mizbeachi. Does behemol not go to Mizbeach? Behemol. Oh, since the behemol goes to Mizbeach. When a person's Makdish his flocks, of course, he means to Mizbeach. Why would you say that if a person's Makdish his flocks, it should go to Beit Beis? Answer one. You're right. You're right that when a person's Makdish his flocks, it should go to the Mizbeach. But this person wasn't just Makdish his flocks. He was Makdish everything else that he owns. Since he was Makdish everything else that we own, we say that just like he was Makdish the pots and pans, and they go to Beit Beis, so too the flocks go to Beit Beis. It makes no difference. Makdish nechosov, he Makdish hedroi, he machlokes. That's the machlokes. Okay, there's no difference. Whatever you're Makdish, that is machlokes of Lezer and Yeshua. The halacha is like this. That if you ever Makdish a korban to Beit Beis, you've actually done an aveil, by the way. That means if you take a sheep, which could be bought as a korban, and Makdish to mimin the Beit Beis, you've done an aveil. You've done an aveil. What's the aveil that you've done? Anybody know? That you could have bought as a korban, and instead you transferred it to the fund of the Beit Beis. You shouldn't have done that. Now, if you do that, let's say you take a sheep, you've got a nice sheep which could be bought as a korban, and you say that sheep should be for the building fund of Beis Hamikdash, you've done something wrong. When you've done it wrong, it's too late now, it's building fund. What are you supposed to do? Anybody? What? No. It's not. It's not allowed. It's not allowed. No. What you do is like this: you sell it to somebody who needs to buy it as a korban. Then the money. Let's say, for example, I'm active. This is a sheep, and I back this shit as a building fund. Now, I shouldn't have. I should put it as a korban. Why should I put it as a korban? Because much more kedusha. So what I do is like this: I look to you and I say to you, did you promise to bring an oiler the other day? Yes, you did. Here, take this as an oiler. How much were you going to spend on oiler? £100. Give me the £100, and I give the £100 to the building fund. That way, the sheep goes on the mizbeach, and at the same time, the building fund didn't lose out. That's just the way we do it. What? No, it has. The building fund gained. The mizbeach hasn't gained. Yeah, you're right. The mizbeach hasn't gained, but the building fund has.
You think it's very wrong. As a building fund rather than an animal. Why can't you just go as the person himself give that as an animal and give £100? The worst.
You can't, because once you makdish it for Beis, you can't. The mizbeach lost out. Yes, the mizbeach lost out. That's his. The mizbeach lost out.
Why would they have lost out? His intention wasn't to give sheep.
Yes, I know, but really, the sheep is potential to be brought to mizbeach. Oh, short of mizbeach. Now, what happens if a person does the double thing wrong? What does he do? He then takes the sheep and he sells it to somebody who wants to eat meat for yom or for a party. And then he takes the £100 and he gives it to the Beis Hamikdash. So now what he's done is he's been redeemed it, because if let's say I was makdish my talis for Bedek Habayis, what would I do? They're not going to use my talis. They'd sell it for £100,000, posh talis made out of pure silk. And then what would they do? They would use the money for Bedek Habayis. So if I makdish a sheep and I sell it to somebody who wants to have a party and I give them money, I've done it. The question is that what happens then? That's the question. Really, what I should have done is sold it to Chaim as a korban. But I didn't. I sold it to somebody else as a meat. It says it well like this. End of the day, he goes to chulin. It's done. What he's done is done. My sister Omar came. There's a mefurish mishnah that if you redeem it, then you're allowed to eat it and do what you want with it. And now, let's say I sell it to Moshe to make a party. He makes a party out of it, and I take the £100, give it to Bedek Habayis, which is like exactly what Rabbi Yochanan says. Says the Gemara, your base on the base. Only if later it got a Baal Mum. That means I sold it when it was a Tmimim. Later got a Baal Mum. Once it's got a Baal Mum, so you can't anyway bring it as a common. Then you're allowed to. I've got a raya. Why? Because there's another Beis says, the Beis says you're not allowed to eat it. Now that's a contradiction. The Mishnah says you are, the Beis says you're not. The answer is simple. The Mishnah is talking about where I sold it when I shouldn't have. And later you got a mum. So now you can say, look, I know coming as a korban. Let me at least enjoy it. The Beis about we never got a mum, and therefore you can't eat it. Oh. That means he holds they always go lechulin, whether they have a Baal Mum or whether they're not a mum. In Tema leyotz lechulin, koch mizbeach chulin koch Bedek Habayis, Baal Mumin. Oh, so the Gemara says, how can you say they shouldn't go lechulin? At the end of the day, this was going for Bedek Habayis and not for koch mizbeach. Koch mizbeach chulin leider mida legizav la'avoda. Oh, what leider means? What is it made for? Legizav la'avoda. Therefore, it is. We don't say that it is awesome. On the contrary, the Gemara says that you're allowed to bring it even for Bedek Habayis, meaning that not like of Chista that it has to become Baal Mum. Even if it does not become a Baal Mum, even if it stays at Tmimin, you can still be makdish it as Bedek Habayis, and it'll be mutter begiza v'avoda, and it become completely mutter. Says it like this: Hifish nekiva lo ilosa. If a person separated a female sheep for an oila, ulepischoy v'la'ashamoy oisetmo, we know that an oila, pesach, and an asham do not come female. You have to bring them male. That's one of the important things about common pesach, that it has to come as what? Male. It has to be male. So this person went and took a female sheep and said it should be a Korban Pesach. And then after that, he did another Avera. He made Tmur. You're not allowed to make Tmur. The question is, do we say female sheep can't be Korban Pesach anyway? Since it can't be a Pesach, therefore it's not really Tmur. Or do we say, wait a second, you made it Korban Pesach. Since you made it a Korban Pesach, so therefore it makes Tmur. That is the Shiloh over here. So the Gemara says that Reb Shimon Omer lo lase setmor, le Pischa la Shomer eno setmor. So we've got two shittas so far. Reb Shimon lo lase Pischa la Shomer eno setmor. We've got three shittas altogether. First man Domar says it always makes temor. Reb Shimon differentiates between the common oila and the Pesach van Asham. Reb Shimon says it never makes temor. That means like this: since by a bird it can come as an oila, and a bird can come female. So when you make an animal which is female into a common oila, what you have done is not completely unimaginable, because we sometimes have female coming an oila. When do we have female coming an oila? As a bird. So if you make a female as an animal as an oila, it's not completely unimaginable. Therefore, a certain kedusha is chal on the animal, and if you do temura, it goes kedusha. Masha'enki by Pesach, Pesach's never bought as a bird, or an Asham is never bought as a bird. So therefore, it's impossible for Pesach and Asham to ever come female. So you made a female Pesach and Asham, so therefore there's no kedusha. Since there's no kedusha, when you make temur, nothing happens, and the next animal is not kadosh. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda tam the Shom Yehuda emin b'mino yocholok olav kosh k'mim she'eno mino ezu min b'mino yocholok olav. What does that mean? Kod the Tani Asher ben Shona ben Stein ben Shona shlo yotza. Sometimes an Ashana has to be 1 year, sometimes Ashana has to be 2 years. It depends which Ashana. There are 5 different Ashamos. Some of them have to be 1 year, some have to be 2 years. If you bring one which is 2 years, it's supposed to be 1 year, or 3 years, it's supposed to be 2 years, the Asham is not Kaddish. It doesn't have any Kedusha at all, which means that you can't make Timur. Says the Gemara, if by getting the right animal, just the wrong age, you can't do Timur. When you get the wrong one. So therefore, he holds that you can't make Timur. If you make a female animal into an Asham, you can't do Timur to it. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shua, Shnei Mamud Echad. Come on, Rabbi Shua. Come on, what weight? Rabbi Shua, man, the Kivu Lo Kid Shua like this Domim. Kino Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Shimon, the Kivu Lo Kid Shua like this Domim. In Temas, if we should say, that all they'll do is they should graze and no more. Meaning like this, that according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that it does not make temur, it fits in with Rabbi Yeshua, who says that if a person's makdish a korban Pesach as a female animal's korban Pesach, it doesn't go as a korban altogether. In fact, what happens is it goes as hekdesh bedek Beis and not to the mizbeach altogether. So here the Gemara asks a kasha, Omar Rabbi, and where's the vision of Pesach? Shabbos Pesach bo shlomim. That means that the Beis, that we know that a korban Pesach which can't be used as a korban Pesach, let's say it's left over, what happens to it? It's bought as a shlomim. A shlomim can be bought female. So if I am makdish as a sheep, as a female sheep as a korban Pesach, there's a certain level of kedusha which is potential chal, the shlomim. Says, well, if that's the case, you should say the same problem by an oila. The halacha is that if you've got an asham which becomes no good, the simple way of asham becoming no good is, let's say the asham got lost, so you bought another asham, then you found the original, or the asham where the owners died, so it's called the asham shnita kliviyah. And the asham shnita kliviyah, we wait for it to graze. Once it grazes and it gets a bal mum, we sell it for an oila. So you see that an asham can become an oila. If an asham can become an oila, and the oila can become female by a bird, so therefore we should say that by an asham as well, it should create more by female, just like you said by korban Pesach, that it's shaykh to have more by korban Pesach, because even though it's female, because it could come as a shlomim after Pesach, and asham which is literally will come to an oila, which also comes female, so it should also be. So he said, at the end of the day, a korban Pesach, which is bought as a shlomim, you'll actually bring the korban Pesach itself as a shlomim. Now, shaking by an asham, it's not like that. What happens by an asham? You wait for it to get a mum, you sell it, and then with the money, you buy a korban oila. So it's not the actual animal is ever going to become as an oila. So it's not the same. So Bo says like this, that the Maisa, what's the din? The din is that just like if your makdish hekdesh guf becomes kaddish and it can do t'mur, hekdesh domim does not create t'mur, and therefore for a person's makdish hekdesh domim, there's no t'mur whatsoever. And the most pasuk therefore that by a hekdesh of an asham, which is or an oila, which is female, there's no t'mur. Okay, should we stop here? They're starting with the shachris half past. Okay, we'll stop here. So we're up to Rabbi Ze'era. So it's a new point. And there'll be a siyum with Shem tomorrow. Tomorrow the share is before Mincha. not after mincha. I'm not sure why they made it like that. That's what it says on the timetable.
What time is that?
What's good?
Tomorrow is at 7:30.
The shiur is what time?
Let's say 6:45.
Right, the shiur is 6:45 tomorrow. Yes.
Because the clock has changed.